spread at Afghanistan. Posted by user Doug Dante. The post is a linked post titled, quote, "I begged them. My daughter was dying," unquote. How Taliban male escort rules are killing mothers and babies. With the subtitle, Women Under the Taliban. The comment for this post reads as follows. The need for women to be accompanied by a man in public is blocking access to health care and contributing to soaring mortality rates, says experts. It was the middle of the night when Zareen Gul realized that her daughter, Nasreen, had to get to the hospital as soon as possible. Her daughter's husband was away working in Iran, and the two women were alone with Nasreen's 7 children when Nasreen, heavily pregnant with her 8th child, began experiencing severe pains. Gul helped Nasreen into a rickshaw and they set off into the night. Holding her daughter's hand as the rickshaw jolted over the dirt road, Gul says she prayed they would not encounter a Taliban checkpoint. Before I go into the link for this article, I want to point out this is what Christian nationalism is looking to do. It might not look exactly the same as what the Taliban has, but they definitely want women to be chaperoned and be under the control of men. I also want to highlight this one comment, which I very much identify with, where user Dadophorus Basilia wrote, "I wish I could scoop up all the women and their dependents and tell the men to have fun." I do as well. User Dadophorus Basilia. I wish we could do that. Imagine the pain, the humiliation, and the degradation that is the life of these women in the Taliban. Regardless if they truly believe the religious part of that system or not, they are being treated as property, as literal property in our current day and age, and that is simply unacceptable. But unfortunately, they are under the control of this militant group, this militant Islamic group. Which means that if you go through any efforts to free them or liberate them, you're going to have a whole bunch of men in turbans and guns coming after you. Here, the subtitle reads, "The need for women to be accompanied by a man in public is blocking access to health care and contributing to soaring mortality rates, says experts." This was written by Sana Atif, Fresh Jagani, Ruchi Kumar, and Zuhal Ahad, back on April 3rd, 2025. Continuing from where the article left off in that comment that was left as a description for that post that I began reading. Holding her daughter's hand as the rickshaw jolted over the dirt road, Gul says she prayed they would not encounter a Taliban checkpoint. Quote, "I kept thinking, if only Nasreen's husband were here, if only I could ease my daughter's pain," end quote, she says. Her prayers were not answered. The rickshaw's small lamp was spotted by Taliban fighters who signaled for them to stop and demanded to know where they were going. As a frightened Gul explained that her daughter was sick and needed urgent medical attention, they asked why the women were traveling without a male escort, or mahram. Linked here. Even though Gul explained that Nasreen's husband was working abroad, the fighters refused to allow them to pass and continue their journey to the hospital. Quote, "I begged them, telling them my daughter was dying. I pleaded for their permission," end quote, says Gul. Quote, "But they still refused. In desperation, I lied and said the rickshaw driver was my nephew and our guardian. Only then did they let us pass," end quote. By the time they reached the hospital, it was too late. Nasreen's baby had already died in her womb and her uterus had ruptured. The doctor said Nasreen needed to be transferred to another hospital, and so Gul helped her daughter into another rickshaw and they set off again towards a government hospital an hour away. On their way, they were stopped at 2 more Taliban checkpoints, each time detained for long periods because they were traveling alone. They did finally reach the hospital, but Nasreen had not survived the journey. Quote, "The doctors told us that due to excessive bleeding in the ruptured uterus, both the baby and the mother had died," end quote, says Gul. Quote, "We buried them side by side," end quote. Side note, how tragic, extra tragic, it must be to be a woman in Afghanistan right now, because not only are you not allowed to travel anywhere without a male escort, even when you are about to die, you cannot use an ambulance or a chopper or anything to get you the medical care that you desperately need to stay alive. Continuing on, The Guardian and Zan Times, an Afghan news agency, has interviewed dozens of women and healthcare professionals across multiple Afghan provinces. Linked here. Their testimonies build a picture of a maternal and child healthcare system dangerously compromised and eroded by the Taliban's draconian policies towards women. Linked here. Below that, we see an image of multiple Afghani women in a hospital room, and the caption below it reads, "An overcrowded maternity ward at the Zabul Provincial Hospital in the city of Kalat in southern Afghanistan. Photograph, Kiana Hayeri for Karmanyak Foundation." Continuing reading. The refusal to let women travel to hospitals unaccompanied, combined with increasing rates of early marriage, poor access to health care, unsafe roads, and a cultural neglect of women's health, will inevitably contribute to increased maternal deaths in Afghanistan, according to UN agencies, linked here. Even before the Taliban took power, Afghanistan had a maternal mortality rate 3 times higher than the global average, according to the last official World Bank figures from 2020, linked here. Experts warn that maternal health is likely to deteriorate further, compounded by the Taliban's decision in December 2024 to close all medical training to women, including prospective midwives, linked here. Again, side note, remember what happened with Roe v. Wade being overturned and with certain states in the U.S. deciding that their policies should not be informed or be updated, and their laws also not being updated by medical professionals and people who warn of this similar kind of thing. This is only a few steps removed from what is happening in Afghanistan. Continuing on, according to a report by the World Health Organization, (WHO), linked here, 24 mothers and 167 infants already die every day in Afghanistan from preventable causes. It is estimated that more than 20,000 villages across the country lack basic healthcare services, affecting 14 million people. A recent UN Women report estimated that by 2026, a woman's chance of dying in childbirth will have increased by 50%, linked here. Below that, we see another image. This time, according to the caption, this 22-year-old midwife has helped deliver 9 babies during her 13-hour shift at the Zabul Provincial Hospital in the city of Kalat in southern Afghanistan. Photograph, Kiana Hayeri for Karmanyak Foundation. Continuing reading. Hospital staff in provinces across Afghanistan have reported that women have been persistently prevented from accessing maternal health care because they were not accompanied by a man. Here we have a featured quote. "Most arrive in critical condition, and some die simply because they were brought in too late." Continuing on, a medical professional at Mirai Regional Hospital in Kandahar says the hospital receives female patients from across Kandahar, but also from neighboring provinces. Quote, "Most arrive in critical condition, and some die simply because they were brought in too late," end quote, they say. Quote, "Some babies die in the womb, while others pass away within minutes of birth," end quote. According to staff, the hospital recorded at least 800 maternal deaths and more than 1,000 newborn deaths last year. Quote, "A young woman arrived at the hospital after giving birth in a taxi. end quote, says Samina, a midwife working in a government hospital in Kandahar. Quote, her baby had died on the way due to a lack of oxygen. When I asked her why she hadn't come to the hospital sooner, she replied, quote, I had to wait for my husband to return from work. I had no other male guardian, end quote. And overall quote. 2 women told the Guardian they had experienced miscarriage due to inability to access care. One interviewee reported the death of a family member during labor. Quote, my sister died yesterday during childbirth, end quote, says 35-year-old Pashtana from Kandahar province. Note that there's a star next to her name, Pashtana, which means that that is an assumed name, usually not the person's real name. Continuing on, quote, her husband was not at home when she went into labor and she could not go to the doctor alone, end quote. Pashtana said if her sister had traveled to the clinic alone, quote, she would not be treated because she did not have a maram, end quote. Several women told the Guardian that they were denied treatment and prescriptions in the absence of a male guardian or because they lacked the permission of one. Quote, I don't get to see the doctors or get medicines unless I am accompanied by my son or grandson, end quote, says Kandi Gul, a 50-year-old woman who had traveled to a clinic for an eye exam. Again, note that there's also a star next to her name, Kandi Gul. Also, side note, this is just for an eye exam. It doesn't matter what kind of medical care, you are automatically treated as property in Afghanistan. And again, this is what more fundamentalist Christian types want to see, especially for their own women. Continuing on, a female doctor from the eastern province of Nangarhar says, quote, since the Taliban takeover, women don't visit the doctor unless the sickness develops to the point of being unbearable. Here, there is another picture interjected of an Afghani woman and her child. My correction, it is the midwife and a child. Noting that the caption reads, a midwife holds a baby girl at Zabul Provincial Hospital. She is one of 8 midwives at the hospital, which also has 2 female doctors and 1 senior female doctor. They were trained before the recent Taliban ban on women attending nursing and midwifery courses. Photograph, Kiana Hayeri / Kiana Hayeri for Carmignac Foundation. Continuing reading, quote, one reason is because of financial hardships, but sometimes the reason is because the men of the families are careless and do not bring the women to the doctor sooner, and since they can't travel on their own, their condition worsens, end quote, she says. Already, a growing shortage of qualified medical professionals and midwives is putting the lives of women and children at serious risk, particularly in rural areas where few trained doctors are available. Doctors interviewed by The Guardian estimated that, quote, more than half, end quote, of their female colleagues had quit their jobs, particularly in smaller cities and villages. Quote, most of my colleagues have left Afghanistan, and this has severely affected the healthcare sector in the country, end quote, said Dr. Seema, who chose to stay along with her husband, also a doctor. Note that there is a star next to the name Seema. And side note, I believe that's the case because she could face very serious repercussions, including injury and death, if her real name were to be published. Also, side note, it's very telling when you have female medical staff that are trained, that are qualified professionals, leave the country because there is a fundamentalist religion that would force them to either abandon their profession or work under extreme restrictions. Continuing on, quote, we are both specialists and we realized we would not be able to do this work abroad, so we stayed to serve the country, unquote. A midwife from Takhar province says officials from the Taliban's Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice constantly harass and humiliate female medical staff. Quote, we try our best to do our jobs, but the pressure is unbearable. Many of us just want to quit. Sometimes they insult us, claiming our clothing is, quote, un-Islamic, end quote. One day, our emergency ward was overwhelmed with patients. That section is for women only, and men are not allowed. But Taliban enforcers barged in and took away 3 female nurses, claiming their uniforms were inappropriate. They made them sign a pledge to wear longer clothing before letting them go. Even in life and death emergencies, instead of letting us treat patients, they are instead arresting us over our clothing." End quote. Here ends the article. Below that, we see a star that says, in italics next to it, "Names have been changed to protect the identity of the interviewees and some of the writers." A version of the story was originally published by the Zan Times, linked here. These women are living in hell, and I wish there was something that I could do to help them. And I'm sure you do as well. Even if it's just helping causes to help free these Afghani women and get them resettled anywhere else. Probably not in the US, because whatever immigration or protected status they would have would likely be revoked under Trump and current administration and current ICE policies. But at least reestablished and rehabilitated somewhere, so that they have a chance at the very basics of what we have determined is necessary for humanity to flourish, which is life, liberty, and the ability to pursue your own medical needs. Thank you for watching/listening, and I will see you in the next one.